Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 116 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I'm your host, Mark Harris. Solo this episode, and we'll be solo for most of the future going forward. Colton, he's dedicating more time to his own YouTube channel, The Scramble Drill, which he does good work about fantasy football because he works for the football guys along with being a teacher. So check that out. In the near future and going forward, it'll pretty much just be me. Maybe I'll have a few guests on here and there to talk about the comings and goings of ASU athletics. But yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. This episode is just going to kind of be a potpourri of ASU sports topics. I'm going to touch on baseball, football, basketball, hockey. So not really a one theme for this show. So just going to kind of touch on a little bit here and there. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And remember to follow the College Huddle. Great off-season content there from the fellow College Huddle shows. All right, let's dive into it. ASU basketball won over the weekend against Kansas State. Won convincingly, 66-54. Jaden Quaintance really got back into his full form with 18 points. And, I said on Twitter, that game, it doesn't change anything with this season, right? They still have four Big 12 wins. They're not, it's not like, oh, now they're going to make the tournament. No, it's still a bad situation overall. But I was happy for the players on the team. I really was. They had just gone through, I think, a 5-game losing skid. Let me check. But it was nice to see them just kind of play up to their potential, too. Because if you've been watching this team, yeah, it was a 6-game losing skid. Jeez. But if you look at those games, like Kansas State game at home, that was a game they could have won. The Texas Tech game, that was maybe their best performance of the season. They just lose. And then the TCU game they could have won. So the Iowa State game was closer than the final score. They're not quite as bad as their 13-14 overall record, but they still have that record all the same. And with that said, it's just nice, just on an individual personal level, for those guys to have a good game, especially after BJ Freeman was, dismissed, apparently wasn't the right term, since BJ Freeman has been separated from the team. I don't know. He clearly, something happened behind the door, behind closed doors. I'd seen some bad body language from him, but I kind of don't blame a player for having bad body language in a situation like this. So I don't know. I've seen some criticism that this is a theme with Hurley teams and, people, the Josh Christopher thing in the 2020 season or 21 season, the Jose Perez situation at the end of last year, and then now BJ Freeman getting released from the team. I don't know how much that really holds up, because the Josh Christopher situation, he was a one and done. It's kind of I don't know. It didn't really have any real effect. And then I would have put Jose Perez in that bin, but I was listening to the PHNX Sun Devil show the other day, and he commented on the stream and said that he and Hurley have a good relationship. So it might just be a one-off, but it's still a really bad look to lose Freeman, who has been probably their most consistent offensive player, and at least according to the stats, is their top scorer in terms of points per game. So not great, but I mean, at this point, it's just, it doesn't really move the needle, right? The season is going the way it's going. And I mean, this is one of their better performances of the season, and it happened without BJ Freeman. So maybe he was just a tough presence in the locker room or something. I don't know. Sucks to see Quaintance roll his ankle again and go down. Hurley said on Tuesday that they will most likely know his status before the BYU game. Number 25 BYU comes to Tempe on Wednesday night in the second to last home game of the year. It's also nice to see Amir Ali kind of string some decent performances together. He scored 18 in that close loss at Texas Tech. You're seeing his shot fall a little bit, goes 3 of 6 in Manhattan, and decent performance from Sean Phillips too. And so, it as this season winds down. Look, I'll be honest, I don't want ASU to unless they win out or something, but I'm not sure how much I want ASU to do just well enough to keep Bobby. But at the same time, I also want to watch competent basketball, and that's what they have been playing, mostly competent basketball recently. The Houston game was ugly, but again, Houston kind of does that to everyone, so I can't blame them too much for that. I've kind of been, this kind of reminds me of a soccer team that I've been on as a kid where it's late in the season, the team's bad, but you still kind of play for pride and you actually play kind of better late in the year with the pressure removed. And I do think that's kind of funny. And you look at this BYU game, I was surprised to see the spread of BYU. So it opened at BYU being favored by 3.5, now up to 5.5. I get why the line has grown larger in favor of BYU, but that's a closer spread than I would have envisioned. Maybe people are anticipating that Quaintance won't play, and I understand why money would come in on BYU in that scenario. For some reason, I feel like ASU is going to give them a game on Wednesday. BYU came off a very emotional win in Tucson, to say the least, with the call and the ensuing theatrics after that. And I mean, it's college basketball, right? ASU's not as good as Texas Tech, and they took them to double overtime. They're not as good as Iowa State, and they hung with them for 35 minutes. Same deal with U of A when they played in Tempe. So, it can happen, right? ASU, the issue with this year's team isn't that they're just a complete disaster with no hope. It's that they do have some talent and it hasn't come together on a consistent basis. So that means it can conceivably come together in one game, right? Similar to last year, right? When they beat Washington State in Tempe. And that was a Washington State team that had some pretty good players. I mean, Jalen Wells is a dark horse rookie of the year candidate, right? And he was on that team. Jagomoski's good, Rice. So anyway, it's not inconceivable they beat a ranked BYU team tomorrow. I don't think they will. But after seeing how they played against K-State, and again, K-State isn't that great, but to go on the road and win by double digits, I'll take that. So, they're not – I don't want to be too sunshine pumper here. Again, it was their first win after a 6-game losing skid. So it's not like they were, lighting the world on fire. But that's why I go back to my tweet that I had on Sunday. It was just nice to see for those individual players. You don't want to keep losing like that. And it's been tough. Hurley said in his press conference today, he hasn't checked his social media since the U of A game. And it's pretty smart because it hasn't been very positive for old Bobby on Twitter since then. So I don't know how much doom scrolling Coach Hurley is usually doing, but smart of him to limit that in the present day. Not too much else. Obviously, other than James Harden, it coming out that he donated 6 figures to the Sun Angel Collective. That had been kind of reported previously, but it became much more widespread on Tuesday with the front office sports article. And it's unfortunate that that money hasn't led directly to a better record this year, but it's still a really good thing. It's still a really good thing. It's still good for a athletic department like ASU to have money coming into the collective, even if it doesn't totally materialize into success. Now, that can't go on forever, right? But I mean, heck, the whole freaking history of this show, a huge subplot has been, oh man, the collective isn't getting enough money. Oh man, like we're behind all this. And to have James Harden donate a large sum of cash into that collective, that is a good thing. Even if it doesn't necessarily translate into anything, it's still a very good thing. And hopefully it's some other really relevant ASU athletes. Cough, Phil Mickelson, cough, John Rahm. use that Saudi money to pump up the Sun Angel Collective. I don't really love the source of it, but it all counts the same in the collective. So yeah, nice to see James Harden is using his. I mean, he's made so much money in his career. He's probably got like $300 million in the bank. So not that he needs to, donate even more or anything, but still pretty cool that James Harden just has a continuing connection with the program. And he seems like he's like a real Sun Devil, like you have guys that come through and it's like, not every player comes through a school and is like really not represents, but like really is like a fan of the school afterwards, but to have a guy like James Harden, who at this point is probably ASU's most famous, let's take Mickelson and Rahm out of it, probably ASU's most famous alum right now, athletic alum. So pretty cool to see that. You wonder how that'll translate in the future. It's got to be a kind of a difficult balance for these collectives, not just the Sun Angel Collective, but any collective. Because like, do you pester him like, hey James, we saw that you donated X amount to the collective last year. Would you want to do that again? And like, you don't want to keep pestering him over and over, but it's also good to have the connection and the relationship with James Harden. So that's a good sign, even amidst a very disappointing season for ASU basketball. And, like not having Freeman isn't a good thing. So hopefully, whatever his professional career is in the future, I wish him the best. He, I don't know what happened in, behind the scenes, but he at least provided some competency for this team. But they played pretty well without him. So who knows how it'll shake out in these Final Four regular season games of the year. All right, on to Sun Devil hockey. So after a split against Western Michigan at Mullett Arena this past weekend, ASU remains at second place in the NCHC. They're 12th in the USCHO poll. And according to Pairwise, and I don't understand all the math behind it, but according to Pairwise, they have like a 35% chance to make the NCAA tournament. And I just don't get how that holds up, because they've done well against Denver. They beat Western Michigan in regulation, then lost in overtime. And so if you're going to, like, that's a pretty good result, right? That's basically the second best possible result you can have out of a 2-game series, is an outright win and then an overtime loss. But it doesn't seem to affect them. I know that they lost to Air Force early in the non-conference, and apparently that's really weighing them down in the metrics. And then their road series against Minnesota Duluth wasn't great, but I just struggle to understand how the team with the second best points, at least, right, in the NCHC is a bubble team. Like they should be in. And they have a huge series against Omaha on the road. And apparently like they can't afford to stumble there, and that's really unfortunate because Omaha's one of the better teams in the NCHC. So, it's a weird place they've got them in because the team has been good. Like this past series generated a lot of buzz, not just from the ASU people. Like I saw that Mark McClune from Arizona Family went to the Greg Powers press conference on Tuesday, and like a lot of times, a television reporter in Phoenix isn't going to the ice hockey coach press conference, but I think that kind of shows that they've really kind of penetrated the Phoenix market a little more than people thought they would. And it's sadly a side benefit of the Coyotes leaving. When we did the episode last year of is the Coyotes leaving actually good for ASU hockey? It's kind of proving to be true. And I'm from Seattle and I lost the Sonics. And while I don't think the Coyotes had the same level of cultural relevance in their market that the Sonics did, not even close to the same level of success or, time spent in the market, it's still horrible to lose a team, and it sucks. Like there's nothing good about it. However, with that said, from an ASU hockey specific standpoint, it has benefited them because I saw a tweet. I think it was from Craig Morgan. I want to say it was from Craig Morgan, basically saying, I see a lot of Coyotes license plates in the parking lot, right? Like if you're a hockey fan in the desert, your best option is to go to ASU men's hockey. This is the point that I talk about when others compare, like others get mad about like ASU men's basketball fan support or football fan support when things are going bad. It's like, well, it's not the number one option of its sport in the market, right? Why would I go, like, if I'm a neutral fan, why would I care about ASU men's basketball when I can care about the Suns? Why would I care about ASU football when I can care about the Cardinals? But that doesn't exist for hockey, right? That has been removed. And so it's an unfortunate side effect for, the greater Phoenix area. Like it's better to have the Coyotes here than not. But it's benefited Arizona State. It just has. And I wish I could have gone to the series against Western Michigan this past weekend, but it looked lit. Like it looked freaking awesome. And that Friday game, like I don't know if it's the biggest win in ASU hockey history, but it's a really big win, man. Like it's a big win. And, it's unfortunate they weren't able to close it out on Saturday night, but if you went to one of those games, like you got a good environment. The student section always shows up. I think it's just been such a success, and Ray Anderson gets credit for it. He got the ball roll, or he at least facilitated the growth of ASU men's hockey. And so, we've been critical of Ray Anderson on this show for obvious reasons, mostly with football stuff and some basketball stuff. But like the hockey arena getting built has been a success, and that is one of his lasting legacies. So I always give him credit for that. But yeah, anyway, this is a huge series against Omaha. They're going to Omaha. I'm trying to see. I don't think they're on television, so you're just going to have to listen on Fox Sports 910 radio. And I don't know I'm going to be honest. Like, I don't know exactly what they need to do. Like they might need a sweep to feel comfortable. If they get a split, then they're probably going to have to make some hay in the NCHC tournament, which is, oh wow, they give them a little bit of a break. That's mid-March. Okay, so that's an interesting twist there. Yeah, so ASU hockey's in a good spot, or a pretty good spot. Overall record 18, 12, and 2. They're ironically they're 9-6-1 at home and 9-6-1 on the road. So pretty good. It sucks that they have this thin margin of error that they have to deal with, and hopefully it would just really suck if they have this season and they don't make the tournament. It would, and I don't know if it would. I don't think it would like puncture the momentum, but it would be disappointing because getting to the end, like the way this team scores, I feel like they're always getting to like 3 or 4 goals a game, and maybe that's pretty standard for college hockey now that I say it, but it feels like they can hang with the best teams in the country. Like Western Michigan was, let me look at the USCHO poll. Western Michigan was the number 3 team in the country, and they came very close to sweeping them. So, okay, let's share this tab. USCHO poll. Yeah, Western Michigan drops down to number 4, but ASU at 12. I mean, I think that should be good enough to get them in. I don't, pairwise is less bullish on their chances. So we'll see how that plays out. But I mean, if you're the number 12 team and Omaha's in the receiving votes, so one thing that has hurt ASU is that the NCHC has not been quite as good as it was in previous years. Ironically, it was described as the SEC of college hockey. In the same year, the SEC has a down year in football. The NCHC has a down year in men's hockey. It's kind of funny how that works, but because you have 3 teams in the top from that league, or I get 4 with North Dakota at 18, but they're not going to make the tournament. You have 2 teams from that conference ahead of ASU in Denver and Western Michigan. So, it looks like Boston College is the clear number 1 team based on the votes, and Minnesota is number 2. And again, like if ASU does make the college, the Frozen Four not March Madness, the NCAA tournament for hockey, it would be very it would be very cool for them to play like big name teams in that tournament. Like if they were in a bracket with Michigan State, Ohio State, and Michigan, I think that would draw in a lot of the casual fans as opposed to them playing Quinnipiac or Maine or Providence, right? If you're playing these big brand schools, I think that resonates a lot more with your average Joe Sun Devil fan who's like, oh, ASU's hockey is playing Ohio State with a chance to move on to the Frozen Four. Yeah, I'll watch that, So anyway, critical series this weekend at Omaha. I really recommend following Gabriella Chernoff on this. I think she's been the best ASU hockey reporter. I honestly, I get so much information from her, and credit to Sun Devil Source for recognizing the fan base's appetite for this sport and, justly allocating its resources to cover these games. So, but anyway, Gabriella Chernoff, she does a great job on that beat and just very informative because a lot of like me, a lot of us are kind of learning how the college hockey system works. So big series this weekend at Omaha. They probably need a sweep to feel safe. It's unfortunate because with what they've done this year, they should probably be able to get a split in Omaha and feel good. But according to the pairwise rankings, which again, I don't totally know how those work, but according to those, it seems like they really need a split. So that will be interesting to see this weekend. Again, that game, or the first game, begins on Friday night at. It's not showing the time. Why is it not showing the time? Friday night at Omaha, and then it's showing the time right in front of me. Okay. Both February 28th on Friday starts at 6:07 p.m. March 1st, Saturday, starts at 6:07 p.m. as well. So that should be fun to watch, and hopefully the NCHC stream doesn't crash like it did on Saturday night, which is obviously very disappointing. All right. Oops. Okay, should be showing the baseball page on Sun Devil Athletics. Okay. All right. Arizona State baseball. I know it says they're 6-1. They are 6-2. They just lost earlier Tuesday night to UCLA 8-4. I would say Arizona State baseball has kind of lived up to expectations this season. There you go. It's adjusted to 6-2. So their sweep over Ohio State is proving to be more and more important because they could have easily lost one of the first two games with 2 one-run wins, and then they sweep on the Sunday. They beat Austin Peay, get to 4-0. Tough loss, blown lead against Oral Roberts on Friday night. That was bad. But then they rebound with 2 great wins, 12-5, 9-2, and then fall back to 6-2 with an 8-4 loss to UCLA. They play the Bruins again on Wednesday afternoon at 2 p.m. first pitch. So we'll see how that game goes. And then this series against Minnesota falls into the same bin of Ohio State. Like, you probably need to sweep the Golden Gophers this upcoming weekend. And based on how ASU baseball has played, I think they will be able to do that. The offense is there, right? 9 runs, 7 runs, 17, 5, 7, 12, 9. Like, other than today, right? Tuesday, they scored 4 runs, but in 6 of their 8 games, they've scored at least 7 runs. That's a pretty good place to be. Kienvu is mashing. Nuu Contreras is mashing. Brandon Compton is mashing. One of them was named Big 12 Conference Player of the Week. And I saw that Brandon Compton has like a 1,500 OPS to start the year, which is just absurd. But the pitching remains an issue. It remains an issue. If I'm going to praise the Sun Devils for scoring, 9, 7, 17, 5, 7, 12, 9, and then 4 runs and having a good offense, then I have to criticize them for allowing 8 runs, allowing 6 runs, allowing 10 runs, allowing 8 runs, and then allowing 8 runs again to UCLA. So I think it's just going to kind of be one of those. I think this team has what it takes to just be a better version. Okay, yeah, a better version of what they've been in the past, and that should be good enough to make the tournament. But it is like not having quite as good pitching limits their high-end potential. It just does. And that is disappointing because ASU baseball, there needs to be a point where they're a program that goes back to Omaha on a regular basis. That is well within reason. I've called it the Nebraska football of college baseball, and I think that holds up, man. Like, the history is fantastic. The resources are mostly there. I think the full scholarship announcement should help in the future. And while the resources are there and maybe they aren't there to the full extent of like LSU or Vanderbilt or Tennessee or some of these other SEC schools or, maybe a UCLA or USC, like ASU is still one of the haves in college baseball in the grand scheme of things. And it's just disappointing that this issue doesn't seem to have been corrected. And maybe it'll improve as the season goes along, but when you're giving up, you open the year 8 runs allowed, and then sure you score 17, but you still allow 10, and then you gave up a grand slam, gave up 8 runs on Tuesday to UCLA. Like it's not ideal. And so you don't want to have to rely just solely on offense. And granted, ASU, like these dudes can hit, and the person who did get Big 12 co-player of the week was Nuu Contrades, who last week had a 385 average, 3 home runs, 5 RBIs, 6 runs scored. And then you have, it was Brandon Compton is second in big OPS leaders in the Big 12 through week 2 with a 1.513 OPS. And so Ben Jacobs has 16 strikeouts through 2 weeks, which is second best in the Big 12. Jack Martinez is tied for 5th with 14. So, it's not like they're starting out the season 2-6 or 4-4 or whatever. Like they're 6-2, and that feels about right. I was having a discussion with my friend who this would have been on Friday when they lost to Oral Roberts, and he was complaining that, we lost to this Oral Roberts team. And I was kind of saying like, yeah, I mean, obviously it sucks to lose on that Friday night to Oral Roberts, but when you win your first 2 games by 1 run each, eventually the averages are going to, fall back and you're going to lose one of these 1-run games. So granted, the way they lost, they blew, a 2-run lead in the 9th inning. And it's one of these, like, you don't feel comfortable with a lead in the 9th inning totally with this team. So all of this is to say a good but not great start for ASU baseball. And if they can just kind of keep chugging along at this pace, then they should be fine. But it'll be critical that they don't lose these games to bad opponents. And they almost did on last Monday against Austin Peay, but they were able to get the win. And, Oral Roberts, I didn't know this going into the series, but they're actually a pretty good program for the lower levels of college baseball. Chris Cartman from Sun Devil Source tweeted that they had made 3 straight tournaments. So, taking a series from them is still a really good sign. So, like I said, good but not great start for ASU baseball. If the pitching improves, then this team can really, really rise up, right? Like, I mean, these they have hitters, right? Like Compton, Vu, and Contrades, like those dudes can hit. So, and I'm probably forgetting a few guys as well. But yeah, I'll definitely have to get to an ASU baseball game. They're playing 7 straight games in a row from the 28th to March 9th against Minnesota, UNLV, and Gonzaga, respectively. So good but not great start for ASU baseball. Repeat it for the 3rd time. All right. Now let's move to college football. But Mark, there's no college football going on right now. Well, you're right. But an interesting article came out that portends well for ASU in the future. And it's ESPN's Bill Conley's annual returning production article that unsurprisingly had ASU with the 2nd most returning production of all teams in college football, only behind Clemson, ironically. ASU had 79%, and it was, I don't remember how it shook out. It was like 79% on offense and 78% on defense, because losing Scadaboo, like that's a ton of production lost. And then losing Shamari Simmons and Caleb McCullough on defense is also, it's probably like, I don't have the stats in front of me, like 5 interceptions lost. Simmons forced some forced fumbles. I know it's been a week. I'm still upset that Simmons didn't get invited to the combine It's just ridiculous. He played well in the playoff against Texas. He forced a freaking fumble in the end zone. I don't know how, and he's a big hitter. He's a leader. All this stuff that you want from a football player. He played well in the Shrine Bowl with the over-the-shoulder interception. He's a good player, and I really hope that he hears his name called in the NFL draft because he deserves it. And I would throw in Leaf Fautanu as well, but I think that Simmons deserves it even more. Anyway, rant aside. I said it was unsurprising that ASU is so high in their returning production because if you're following, like they haven't lost anyone aside from the guys who were out of eligibility or some backups. And so it's just a great place for them to be. And, I've compared, I believe 2 shows ago, I compared where ASU football is right now to where UW football was in the Penix DeBoer era. And I'm trying not to drink, I'm trying not to be too hopeful. Like I understand it's a new year and these games are, it's close on the margins and like things can go wrong. But with that said, things are pretending well for 2025, right? I mean, there's no, just from an on paper perspective, they are in good shape heading into next year. Now, knock on wood, hopefully no one leaves in the spring portal. I don't think they would. It seems unlikely that notable players would, but anything can happen in college football these days. I'm not that afraid of it, especially since I believe these guys signed deals, and they also when guys left last year in the spring, and I think I hate to be rude, but the only important players that left were Rashada, and that was a departure that felt way more important in the moment than it actually turned out to be. Badger, that one sucked. That one sucked. I wish we had Badger this past year, but he probably got paid a lot more money at Florida, and I can't be upset at a college football player cashing in as much as they can on their limited time to make money. So, it was unfortunate, but, ASU still went to the playoff and, won the Big 12 without him. So it didn't totally hurt them. And then I'd throw Ed Woods in there too. But the difference is, obviously last year in 2023, they didn't have success. And so there was no proof of concept. And Woods and Badger were 2 guys that came in under the previous staff. And so they might have had more loyalty to the Herm Edwards staff anyway. And, that's just what happens in the churn of college football. So, anyway, but looking ahead to 2025, I mean, we've talked about it, right? You bring back Levitt, you bring back Tyson, you bring back Malik McClain, who should be better. You bring back a guy like Derek Eusebio, who I think will be a good contributor next year. You bring back Mateer. You bring back Jason Brown, Raleek Brown, Kyson Brown. You bring back 4 of 5 offensive line starters, and that is the most underrated thing on this offense, to have that much continuity on the offensive line and have a lot of capable players waiting in the wings is just, it doesn't get talked about enough. It doesn't get talked about enough, and that's such a great thing for ASU football to have in its back pocket entering next year. And then, like I said, on defense, you bring back everyone but Caleb McCullough and Shamari Simmons. And Simmons, again, that's going to be a tough guy to replace. But I think ASU is capable of doing it. You still have Alford and Browser back there in your 2 starting corners, and that's not even mentioning the 2 guys from Purdue that came in. And then I think the linebacker core is in good shape. Remember, Jordan Crook didn't play for all of the year. He was injured earlier in the year, and so with Crook, Zyrus Fiaseu, Martell Hughes, and then obviously Keyshawn Elliott, right? That's a pretty good spot for the linebacker core to be in. And defensive line should only be better than it was last year. And there's some meat left on the bone in terms of pass rushing. Let's hope that Elijah Neal keeps improving. He's benefited from the JUCO decision, and then I think Clayton Smith and Prince Dorba can improve as well. So, there's reason to be optimistic about next year. There just is, and so it's great to see them at second best in returning production. And yeah, well, with all that said, replacing Scadaboo will be difficult. Now, it may not be. I think from just like a total yards and production standpoint, I think ASU will be able to do it with Kyson Brown, Raleek Brown, Jason Brown, McCaskill, and Kanye Udo transferring from Army. But there were definitely some plays that were made last year that could have only been made by Scadaboo. And there were definitely some broken tackles that I don't know if Kyson Brown is breaking that tackle. I don't know if Kanye Udo is breaking that tackle. No, on the flip side, those guys might be able to outrun a defender in the second level and house it, right? Scadaboo didn't really do that last year. So, granted, I'd rather have Scadaboo because he's just so much more consistent on a down-to-down level and just picks up those tough yards. But he's not a perfect player, right? And well, he's pretty close to a perfect player, but his weakness is his long speed. And so maybe Udo and Brown make up for that, even though they may not convert quite as many third and shorts as they otherwise would have with Scadaboo. Because not every third and short, fourth and short that ASU converted last year was blocked super well, and Scadaboo just had an easy first down. There were some that weren't blocked well, and he just broke tackles and got the job done. So that is something to watch for, but I trust this offensive staff to deploy these running backs in an effective way. And as I'm kind of talking through this, I do think Raleek Brown, I don't know if he'll be able to break tackles the way Scadaboo did, but I think he'll be pretty good at breaking tackles. He's a very stout individual, and that can help pick up those short yards as well. And I mean, Jason Brown, he's more of a LaShawn McCoy type guy where he can bounce out and evade tackles, not as much breaking them, in how Scadaboo did. But however you get the yards, right? So anyway, just kind of wanted to talk through that returning production ranking. It's a good spot for ASU to be in. And, Texas Tech, I think a Texas Tech ASU Big 12 championship game would be freaking awesome. And I think if you're the Big 12, you want those two teams to be good next year, to be if there's a way for them both to be 11-1 heading into the Big 12 championship game or better, or if there's a way for Texas Tech to be, 10-2, ASU 11-1, or vice versa, and the 10-2 team wins the Big 12 championship, and then the 11-1 team still gets in the playoff. That is a good place for the Big 12 to be. So ASU hosts Texas Tech this year. That's going to be a big game. And they hosted the game after they play Utah. And I'm kind of worried about that because Utah has that reputation of being the team that, physically beats up its opponent. And that could prove to be bad if ASU's beat up the next game against Texas Tech. So that's down the road. I don't want to be worried about that too much, but it will be interesting to see how the Red Raiders do because they're loading up on the portal as well. And speaking of the Big 12, we didn't really touch on this, but the Big 10 and SEC are talking about kind of taking over the playoff and each having 4 auto bids per conference. And it's kind of a decision of will it expand to 14 or will it expand to 16? And in this scenario, the Big 12 and ACC would each get 2 auto bids. And I've heard some Big 12 fans be like, oh, screw this. they can take their ball and go home. Blah, blah, blah. I do not fall in this category. I'm sorry. The Big 12 and the ACC need the Big 10 and the SEC more than those two conferences need the Big 12 and the ACC. I know that sounds confusing, but the Big 12 is not in the power position here. And I don't know. Like I think turning down 2 auto bids in the playoff could really come back to bite the conference in the ass. I do. And let's just, if we're being honest, like that, I don't think it's that unfair of a proposal, honestly. Like, are there like the top 4 of the SEC and the top 4 of the Big 10 probably are better than the top 4 of the Big 12, right? I let's just look at last year. The top 4 of the Big 12 was ASU, Iowa State, BYU, and Colorado. Solid top 4, better than the top 4 of the ACC, I would say. But the top 4 of the Big 10 was Ohio State, Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and then 11-1 Indiana. Like, that's a better top 4. The top 4 of the SEC, maybe this past year it was down, but like we know the SEC recruits like crazy. Like some of these teams are going to be back. And what was it? It was Georgia, Texas, Georgia, Tennessee, and then Alabama. So this past year the SEC wasn't as good, but I don't think. I mean, I hope that they continue to struggle, but I don't think they will. And so my overall point is like, I don't know. I don't think you should. I think you should just go along with it for now. I know it sucks. I know it's not a fun. It's not a. It would be way more fun to be like, oh, like screw them. We're better than them anyway. It's like, I just think you should be living in reality, and it sucks, right? But none of the Big 12 teams, like ASU, might be the biggest brand in the Big 12. There's an argument for it, right? Like it's probably either ASU, Colorado, or BYU, maybe West Virginia. But like my point is like there's a lot of teams kind of in the good, not great in terms of overall college football history in the Big 12. And the Big 10 and the SEC just have more blue bloods, and therefore they have more resources. Therefore, they're going to be more consistent on average over a year-to-year basis. So it's a tough position, but I think being like, oh, like, you let the Big 10 and SEC take their ball and go home. I think it's an emotional reaction. I think it's an emotional reaction, and guaranteeing yourself 2 spots in the tournament would be good. It just would be. So that might be controversial to some Big 12 fans, but like I said, like the 2, mid-tier leagues, the Big 12 and the ACC, probably in the whole grand scheme of college football, it probably need the top 2 leagues more than those 2 leagues need the mid-tier leagues. And it sucks, right? Like I hope that we can get to a point where it's all just one super league and the top 50 or so programs are all in the same league, and all of a sudden ASU is playing USC and Washington and Oregon again, and it's more uniform, right? But that's not where we're at right now, and so I think getting 2 guaranteed auto bids from the Big 12, like that keeps you in the mix. And there are going to be some years where you wouldn't have otherwise gotten 2 teams in, right? I don't think that like this past year, if it was 14 teams, the way it was ranked, the Big 12 would have not otherwise gotten 2 teams in. It would have just been ASU. And I think BYU probably deserved an opportunity. If it was 14 teams, they deserved an opportunity to be in that situation. But like I don't remember how the exact poll went, but I think Iowa State and BYU were in like the bot like 16 through 20 range in the final rankings. And so I just think you're playing with fire if you don't take this deal, and hopefully you can kind of rework it so you get as much money as possible based on how it's like paid out. But you're not in the best position here, so I think that you should go along to get along, even though it kind of sucks that you have to do it, right? Like it sucks that you're not getting the same respect as those conferences, but this is how it is right now, and I think the alternative there's an opportunity for this to completely blow up in your face if you don't take the 2 auto bids deal. So that's that on the playoff talk. I did see one. This is just really random. and this came out 2 weeks ago on February 9th. It's College Football News, and it's an assessment of the AP college football poll rankings of all time. So according to the AP college football polls, where do all of the teams rank? Here are the top programs of all time utilizing the AP's final rankings. I'll just read it for the podcast audience. This is on collegefootballnews.com. I think it's a really good website. By the way, Pete Futak of collegefootballnews.com was one of the few people that predicted ASU to go to a bowl in the preseason. He had them going 6-6. So this guy, I don't think he wrote this article, unless I scroll all the way down, but this guy knows what he's talking about. No, he didn't write it, but Pete Futak works for this site. I think he's a pretty interesting college football guy. So it's just a good. I think College Football News is a good place for college football content, or college football news, as it were. So I'll read the article for the podcast audience. The AP college football rankings have been the most consistent and reliable since 1936. No other ranking system provides a better historical snapshot of the past 90 plus seasons. They just keep on marching along. According to the final AP rankings for each season, how do all the college football teams rank since the start of the poll? And what are the greatest programs of all time? Take all the AP final rankings and use our simple scoring system. The AP national champion in each season gets 25 points. The number 2 team, 24, number 3, 23, and so on down to the bottom. Based on the final AP rankings from 1936 through Ohio State's 2024 national championship season, who earned the most all-time recognition from the AP voters? Number 1 is Ohio State, ironically. Not surprisingly, makes sense. They're actually just 2 points ahead of Alabama at 1,182 points. Alabama is at 1,180. This does favor, since it goes back all the way to 1936, you have Notre Dame 4th, Michigan 5th, Oklahoma's 3rd, USC 6, Texas 7, Nebraska 8, Penn State 9, Tennessee 10. And then you get into these Southern programs that, in terms of like the really long college football history, like 50 plus years ago and beyond that, they don't have quite as much of a history aside from Alabama. Then you get Georgia 11, LSU 12, Florida State 13, Auburn 14, Florida 15, Miami 16, Clemson 17, UCLA at 18, which again, that speaks to the all the way back, 50s and 60s, Michigan State, Arkansas at 20, Washington at 21, Ole Miss 22, 24 Wisconsin, and 25 Iowa to round out the top 25. Oregon comes in at 26. ASU at 33, right behind Colorado. And I think that's fair. I think ASU as the 33rd best college football program makes perfect sense. And I think, look, you have a team like Missouri right behind ASU. I think ASU and Missouri are very comparable programs in that they're pretty good all time. Pretty good. ASU, again, has a 60% winning percentage, which is, I believe, in the top 25 of all schools. It might be 26. But I think that, like, it shows that ASU having success and winning 10 games in the season, while it feels, very out of the blue this year, given the circumstances, it is not some crazy thing that never happens in the history of the entire ASU football program. This ranked season was the 5th ranked season in the 21st century for ASU, which isn't fantastic, right? It's not, it's, one out of every 5 years you're finishing ranked, but it's also not like horrible and disastrous, right, either. So I think that 33rd all time, you're behind Colorado, which I don't totally love, but we have to remember that Colorado had a good stretch going from like the late 80s right until like 2001, and then since then has mostly been horrible aside from 2 years. But they won a national championship, so that does that does help you out. Stanford's ahead of ASU. I don't know how, but like I can, quibble with, some of these schools that are right in the mix with ASU, but I think that 33rd, I think that makes sense, and ASU's ahead of a school like a Virginia Tech, ahead of Baylor, North Carolina. You're ahead of West Virginia, which I'm kind of surprised about. Kansas State, you're ahead of. Syracuse, I think ASU is a better program than Syracuse, but Syracuse had some good success in like the 60s and way back with like Jim Brown. So that's why Minnesota is so high up there. Like ASU and Minnesota like aren't the same level program now, but it's an 90-year snapshot basically. So it covers a lot of ground. But yeah, interestingly, the University of Arizona, 69th. Look at that, behind Penn and Indiana and Rice and Kansas. Oh my God. So, like a school like Louisville, they're at 62nd. I think they've been way better in the 21st century than ASU, and you have a school like Utah is really far down there too. So it takes in the whole snapshot of 90 years, but I still think it's impressive. And there are like 67 teams in the Power Four now, right? Maybe you bump it up a little bit more if you add in Oregon State and Washington State in that mix, Notre Dame, then it puts ASU as like a slightly above average program, which personally, I think that makes sense. So that this doesn't really have anything to do with the current, state of what's going on, or, I just thought it was an interesting article. So anyway, that does it for this show. Thank you for watching and listening. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, go Sun Devils.